Hey, what's up, you awesome dudes? Craze here, and welcome back to another day in Anthem. Today I'm going to post a different video than the usual. It seems that lately we kinda went over with the news type videos. I kinda didn't want to do that. I was kinda a little bit forced, to keep up with the news, to keep up with the updates and the controversies. But for a very long time I wanted to post build ideas, in-game guides, and all of that for all of the people who are still enjoying this game. And I'm seeing your comments, I'm seeing a lot of you are still actively playing the game, being engaged in it, despite all of these problems. That is why I'm going to bring you today's video, and not just any video. This is going to be for the Storm class, a class that is currently quite the underdog of all of the javelins, specifically because it does not that great damage, it's very squishy, and it has a ton of problems. But despite all of that, there is an absolutely wacky build you can go with, and it's nothing you probably expected. It's way different than any of the Storm builds that you're probably gonna see here on YouTube, and despite all of that, it's most probably the most overpowered right now. As you can see, you're seeing procs on the screen for like 50,000, 40,000, 30,000, and you can go way beyond that, even up towards 100,000 ticks just from your actual weapon. It's insane. You're going to do way more damage than any of the skills in the game. So let's not waste any more time. Let's start things off with the actual build. But before doing any of that, I'm going to take a couple of seconds to give a big shout out to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. If you want to buy cheap games, then go ahead and use the links down below for an additional discount, and you can pretty much buy whatever game you want. There's even programs on that website, so anything you want to, it's on instantgaming.com. With that being said and done, let's go over the Thunderbolt of Ivenia. And speaking of the Thunderbolt of Ivenia, of course, this is the bread and butter of this build. This is the main core functionality, feature, or component of this build. This is what you will absolutely need. The one that I have right now has a bonus of 175% weapon damage. I'm not really sure if that helps with anything, because what we're looking for here is not the actual gun damage, but the actual proc. The 33% chance to deal large electrical damage is what we're looking for specifically. If that buff applies to it, then it's all good. If not, I'm not really sure. I haven't tested that one out. But what I did in order to get this huge buff on my weapon is very simple. I pretty much played the game, got a ton of Masterwork Embers, and just crafted like 10 Thunderbolt of Ivenias in a row until I got the best one possible, and this was the one that I got. Moving on, we have a second weapon that is also very needed, so there's no choice for you here but to go with this one, and that is of course Elemental Rage. Luckily enough, I have a legendary version one, so I'm pretty happy with that. The reason you need Elemental Rage, again, isn't for its bullet damage, but for the actual proc. And this is Veteran's Furor, which pretty much gives you an additional elemental damage of 5% for hitting elite enemies. And it stacks up to 20, which means that if you get a perfect stack of 20, you're gonna get an additional 100% damage to elemental damage. And that applies to Thunderbolt of Ivenia's proc as well, because that is also elemental damage. But of course, this isn't where the build stops. There's quite a lot more to it, and we're going to move in the components section. There's a couple over here that are super important, while the others not really so much. So here you have a little bit more freedom, but the first 2 or 3 are absolutely mandatory. First, I'm going to start with the Tome of Precision. This one increases electric damage by only 5% and the electric effect by 5%, but defeating an enemy increases all elemental damage by 40% for 10 seconds. That is a massive buff. That also goes the same with the next one, which is Token of Daring. This is also very important, and what this does is basically it increases all elemental damage by 35%, while it does decrease physical damage by 35%. So the problem with this is that normally it decreases the damage of your bullets. Physical damage counts towards bullet damage, but you don't care about that. All you care about here is electric damage, and this doesn't affect you at all. If anything, it fully increases your DPS, and you also have that instant recharge on all gear upon shield break, which is also very useful. From here on though, it's pretty much to your option. You don't really have to go with what I have. I went with these ones because I'm using a mixed build where I also want to use some of the abilities, so I want to buff some of my gear damage as well. Gunslinger's Mark can definitely be useful. It increases gear recharge rate by 50%, and it's going to make sense later on in the video because we're going to use Burning Orb, which again further buffs the damage, and I wanted for that. I wanted to have low cooldown on the Burning Orb so I can keep some of the buffs for longer. Then we have the Mark of Wrath. Again, nothing too special over here, just increases gear damage in case I want to do, for example, elemental damage with other spells that I have in my inventory, but otherwise it's really useless and it's just there to buff up my power level. Same goes with the Amulet of Winter. These aren't though very important, and what you can do is even combine them with some epic great gear. For example, you can use Elemental Conduit as well as Lightning Inscription. This will both give you an additional elemental damage as well as electrical damage bonus. These are basically the epic version of the first two Masterwork components that I just showed you, so you can stack, you know, different rarities. I don't really recommend this one, even though the flat 35% damage increase is appealing. It seems that decreasing your actual item level also decreases your damage. Not really sure how that is all tied in with the electrical damage from the Thunderbolt of Ivenia, but I tested it out and the buffs that it gives you are not that great to compensate for what you're losing, but at least that is the conclusion I have came up with. Nonetheless, these are the components, and now it's time to move to the actual gear slots. In the Blast Seal category, you absolutely need the Ponder of Infinity, and you're not necessarily looking here for the Lightning Strike damage or the ability in itself. You're actually looking for its buff, which is Raptor's Amplitude, and all of this does is, while hovering, which as a storm you're doing 99% of the time, electric damage is increased by another 60%. So that is a huge increase. You're getting all of these bonuses left and right. By this time, just using these like 4 components, you're about 200%, probably around that range, increase in electrical damage. So that is absolutely huge. That is how you're going to be pulling those 40k, 60k, 80k. But even if you have absolutely bad gear like I have, only 676 right here, you're still pulling in tons of damage. It's just that you're a glass cannon. The last one, again super useful, is the 10,000 Suns. So the upgraded Burning Orb, which is this 10,000 Sun spell, what it does is that it provides Striker's Wrath. So after hitting an enemy, you gain another 10% increased damage for 10 seconds, up to 10, which means 100% damage increase. And remember how I said that I wanted recharge speed on this ability? Well, this is the reason why. I can pretty much spam it. I can spam the smaller versions of the spell, and I can quickly go out to like 7 stacks, wait a couple more seconds, throw a bunch again, and then I'm pretty much at the full cap of 10, which gives me an additional 100% damage increase on all sources. This is even more important than the actual elemental rage weapon, because this is guaranteed. You can pretty much throw it on any enemy out there and it's going to give you the buff. Meanwhile, elemental rage only works if you're using it on an elite enemy. Of course, if you're playing GM2, then you need to optimize the hell out of this build, and the way you can do that is by going into the Consumables tab and further buff everything that gives you elemental or electric damage. The ones that I absolutely recommend are lightning damage, both the epic and the rare variant. The green one isn't really that important, it's only like a 10% increase. Third one is pretty much your choice. If you want to like fully optimize it, then you can definitely go ahead and pick a third lightning sigil, the green one. But what I recommend you guys doing is actually going for the epic gear sigil, which further decreases the cooldown of your gear by another 30%. And what this means is that you'll be able to use Burning Orb more often and keep that buff more often. This is pretty much the build though. You're gonna have to do quite a little bit of juggling of these buffs before you can reach the top maximum damage. But even if you don't, even if you're lazy like me and straight up just use the gun, you're still going to do way more damage than any of the spells that the Storm currently has. So just the smallest tick that I have seen on regular enemies is around 45,000. That is huge. That is simply double, maybe even triple than some of the best abilities in the game. For example, my 10,000 Suns does a 26,000 damage, and that is on max crit, and of course with the additional 125 gear damage bonus that it has applied on it. And even that doesn't even get close to the amount of damage that I can reach with the Thunderbolt of Ivenia and the Lightning procs. But let's go over to the playstyle, to the actual, you know, drawbacks of this build, because they are drawbacks as well. First of all, you're going to be doing insane damage on any enemy. It doesn't matter where you shoot them. It can be a weak point, it can be on any part of the body, it doesn't matter. The same goes with pretty much any enemy on the map, any boss that you can think of, but there's a few exceptions to them. First of all, there's of course the Titans. Titans are naturally resistant to elemental damage, so this build is really lackluster against them. This is probably the biggest weakness. Any enemy that has resistances to lightning damage or elemental damage will pretty much wreck you, so be careful. If you're planning to go on a Titan hunt, then don't use this build. Otherwise, you're 100% good to go. The second drawback is that you will need ammo, and for that you will need to like pretty much pick up as many ammo packs as possible. That is why it's fully recommended for you guys to use pickup radius. If you remain with no bullets in your cartridge, it pretty much means that you're not going to be doing any damage because the build is fully optimized around that weapon. The third and last weakness of this build is that, well, storms are currently very squishy. I'm not sure if there is a bug, I'm not sure if it's intended, but for some reason my storm dies much easier than the interceptor. for some reason, not really sure why. But if you have a higher power level than I have, then probably you're going to have a much higher survivability rate. But yeah, this is pretty much the gist of it. This is the full build for the storm. I call it the Thunder God because that's what it basically is. Go ahead and tell me how it is, how you find it. Post your comments down below. In the meantime, of course, also aim that like button and subscribe to the channel for more awesome content like this. And I'm gonna see you guys next time, so peace out.